Mountain man sees girl wearing his missing daughter's necklace. The truth destroys him. Jack's life had been shaped by loss, a loss that no amount of time seemed to heal. For years, he had lived alone in the rugged mountains, far from the world of bustling towns and city lights. His small cabin, perched on a cliff that overlooked dense forests and winding streams, was his only company. His days were spent chopping wood, hunting and tending to his few animals. The silence of the mountain, broken only by the occasional rustle of the wind or the cry of a hawk, had become his refuge. But despite the peace of his surroundings, Jack's heart remained heavy. His mind constantly wandered back to the memory of his daughter Emma. She had been only 10 when she disappeared. One moment she had been laughing beside him as they camped under the stars, and the next she was gone. No trace, no footprints, no sign of struggle. She had simply vanished into the night, swallowed up by the vast wilderness that Jack knew like the back of his hand. The police had searched for weeks. Neighbors had combed through every inch of the forest, but Emma was never found. The mystery of her disappearance haunted Jack every waking moment, gnawing at his soul. He had never been the same after that night. His wife, too, had slowly faded away, retreating into her own grief. And so, Jack had chosen to withdraw as well, seeking solace in the solitude of the mountains. The only thing that had kept him tethered to his old life was Emma's necklace. It had been a gift from her mother, a small silver pendant shaped like a heart. She had worn it every day, and Jack could still remember the way it sparkled in the sunlight, catching Emma's joyful smile. He kept the necklace close to him, tucked away in a small leather pouch, as if it were the last remaining connection to the daughter he could never forget. Years passed. The seasons changed. Snow blanketed the ground in winter and the wildflowers bloomed in spring, yet Jack's heart never moved on. Every year on the anniversary of Emma's disappearance, he would visit the old campsite, hoping for some clue, some sign that she had survived. But there was nothing, just the whispering wind and the empty trees that seemed to mock his search. Then, one cold December morning, Jack decided to go down into the nearby town. It was something he rarely did. The townspeople had long since stopped asking him about Emma, their curiosity worn down by the years of silence. But today Jack needed supplies, some flour, salt, and maybe a new pair of boots. It wasn't much, but it was enough to bring him down from the mountains. As he entered the town, he felt the familiar weight of eyes on him. The people in town had grown used to seeing him as the lonely, reclusive man from the mountain. They kept their distance, knowing better than to intrude on his grief. Jack wasn't bothered by their glances. He had long since stopped caring about what others thought. But today, something in the air felt different. There was a strange sense of unease, as if the world had shifted in ways he couldn't yet understand. He made his way to the market, where the vendors were setting up their stalls. The smell of fresh bread, roasting meat, and ripe fruit filled the air. For a moment, Jack allowed himself to be caught up in the busyness of the scene. His eyes moved over the faces of the townspeople, most of whom he didn't recognize. But then, his gaze landed on her. She was standing near the vendor who sold trinkets and jewelry, looking at a display of necklaces. The girl was young, no older than 15, but there was something about her that caught Jack's attention. It wasn't her face. She was just another teenager in a crowd. No, it was the necklace she was wearing. The necklace that gleamed in the sunlight, catching Jack's eye like a beacon. It was Emma's necklace. Jack's heart stopped. For a moment, he thought his mind was playing tricks on him. But there it was, the same heart-shaped silver pendant that had once hung around Emma's neck. The one he had kept in his possession all these years. His first instinct was to rush over to her, to demand answers. But something held him back. He didn't know why, but he couldn't move. The girl didn't notice him at first, her back turned as she carefully examined the trinkets. Jack stood frozen, his eyes fixed on her, his breath shallow. Could this girl be his daughter? No, that wasn't possible. She looked too young. Emma would be in her teens by now, but this girl couldn't be more than 15. Jack's mind raced, but his feet remained rooted to the spot. After what felt like an eternity, the girl turned around, and Jack caught a glimpse of her face. She had dark brown hair that fell in loose waves around her shoulders, and her eyes, Jack couldn't quite place it, seemed strangely familiar. There was something about the way she carried herself, a quiet strength in her posture that reminded him of Emma. His pulse quickened. Without thinking, Jack took a few steps forward. The girl was still absorbed in the necklaces, unaware of his presence. He cleared his throat, the sound foreign in his throat like a growl from deep within. "Excuse me," he said, his voice rough. The girl turned around, startled by his sudden appearance. "Yes," she asked, her voice soft but curious. Jack swallowed hard. "Where did you get that necklace?" he asked, his words coming out in a rush. The girl blinked in surprise. "This. I bought it here," she said, pointing to the vendor behind her. Jack's mind reeled. No, she couldn't have bought it here. That necklace had been with his daughter. It had been with Emma. His voice faltered. "That necklace, it's mine." "It's not something you should be wearing," he said, his tone growing more urgent. The girl frowned, clearly taken aback by his sudden intensity. "I'm sorry, I didn't know," she said, her face clouding with confusion. Jack's heart was pounding in his chest now. He had to know more. He had to know who this girl was. There was no way she could be wearing his daughter's necklace by coincidence. His hands trembled as he took a step closer. "Where are you from?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The girl hesitated, glancing around as if unsure whether she should answer. Finally, she spoke, but her words were cautious. "I live here in town," she said. Jack nodded, though he wasn't satisfied with her answer. "And who are you?" he pressed, his eyes narrowing. She gave him a small, almost reluctant smile. "I'm Lily. I was raised at the orphanage." Orphanage. The word hit Jack like a blow to the chest. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. Could this girl somehow be connected to Emma? He didn't know, but the doubt gnawed at him. Lily seemed to sense his unease, and her expression softened. "I'm sorry if I upset you," she said. "I didn't mean to cause any trouble." But Jack was already lost in his thoughts, his mind spinning with possibilities. He couldn't let this go. He needed answers. His daughter's necklace was not just a piece of jewelry. It was a link to Emma, the only connection he had left. And if Lily had it, there was no telling where that connection might lead. As Jack stood there, staring at the girl, the weight of the necklace in her hands felt like 1,000 pounds. His heart ached, a mix of hope and terror rising within him. Was this the answer he had been waiting for all these years? Or was it another painful reminder of what he had lost? Jack couldn't shake the image of Lily from his mind. After his strange encounter with her at the market, he found himself lost in thought as he walked back to his cabin, the sound of his boots crunching in the snow echoing in the quiet of the mountain. The image of her standing there, wearing Emma's necklace, haunted him. She wasn't his daughter, of course. She couldn't be. Emma had vanished so many years ago, but something about the girl, the way she held herself, the quiet sadness in her eyes, felt too familiar. As he reached the cabin, Jack set his pack of supplies down, but he couldn't focus on the simple tasks of chopping firewood or feeding his animals. Every part of his routine felt like an echo of a life he had once lived, but it was now out of his reach. His thoughts kept returning to Lily. He hadn't meant to come across as forceful, but he had been so overwhelmed by the sight of the necklace that his emotions had spilled out. He knew he had to find out more about her. He couldn't let this go. There was too much at stake. Jack spent the next few days in a haze of uncertainty. He couldn't ignore what he had seen. It was impossible to forget. He tried to convince himself that it was all just a coincidence. That necklace could have come from anywhere, but his gut told him otherwise. He had spent too many years waiting for some clue, some trace of his daughter, and now, out of nowhere, he saw it in the hands of a stranger. The ache in his chest grew heavier every minute, pulling him deeper into a spiral of questions he wasn't sure he wanted to face. On the fourth day after their first meeting, Jack made up his mind. He would go back to the town. He needed to see Lily again, to talk to her. It wasn't enough to stand on the sidelines. He had to know more about her, about the necklace, about everything. The doubt gnawed at him, a constant presence in the back of his mind. He put on his thick coat and set out. The sky was heavy with clouds, and snow was beginning to fall again. The road down the mountain was slippery, but Jack had traveled it countless times and knew its twists and turns. It felt as though the mountain itself was trying to keep him in its embrace, keeping him away from the questions that lingered in the town below. By the time he reached the market, the wind had picked up and there was a bitter chill in the air. The small crowd of shoppers seemed unfazed by the cold, moving briskly from stall to stall. Jack scanned the crowd, his eyes searching for Lily. She was easy to spot. She stood near the jewelry vendor again, looking over the same necklaces, her fingers running over the delicate pieces as though searching for something. Jack's heart raced as he approached her, his breath visible in the cold air. This time he was calm. Or at least he tried to be. He didn't want to come across as desperate or demanding. He didn't want to scare her away. But the questions were burning inside him, and he knew that if he didn't ask now, they would consume him. "Lily," he said, his voice a little softer this time, but still carrying the weight of the urgency he felt. She turned, her eyes meeting his with a mixture of surprise and caution. "Oh, it's you again," she said, her tone polite but guarded. She didn't seem uncomfortable, but Jack could tell she was unsure of what to make of him. He didn't blame her. He probably looked like a madman, the way he'd approached her the last time. "I'm sorry to bother you again," Jack said, feeling a sudden twinge of guilt. "But I need to ask you something." Lily looked at him, her brow furrowing slightly. "What is it?" she asked. "I've been thinking a lot about that necklace you're wearing," Jack began. "I know it's not something that's mine to claim, but it's important to me. That necklace belongs to someone very special to me." Lily's expression softened, and she glanced down at the necklace as if noticing it for the first time. "I didn't mean to upset you," she said quietly, her voice tinged with uncertainty. "I'm sorry. I didn't know it had such significance." Jack took a deep breath, steadying himself. "It's not just a necklace," he said, his voice growing heavier with the weight of his emotions. "It belonged to my daughter. She went missing years ago, and I've never been able to find out what happened to her." Lily's eyes widened in surprise. She looked at Jack with a mixture of curiosity and sympathy. I didn't know," she said softly. "I'm really sorry. I didn't mean to cause any trouble." Jack could see the genuine concern in her eyes, but it didn't ease the turmoil inside him. "I need to know where you got it," he said, his voice urgent now. "I need to know who gave it to you." Lily hesitated for a moment before responding. "I told you before, I was raised at the orphanage," she said slowly. "I've had this necklace for as long as I can remember. It's all I've ever had. It was just always with me." Jack's heart skipped a beat. The orphanage. His mind raced, piecing together fragments of information. He had heard rumors over the years, whispers about children being abandoned in the woods or left on the doorstep of the orphanage. It had always seemed like a distant possibility. But now, standing in front of him, was a girl who had spent her life there and had been wearing his daughter's necklace. The knot in his stomach tightened as a wave of emotion washed over him. Was this a coincidence? Could it really be that Emma had somehow ended up in the same place as Lily? But how? The years didn't add up. He tried to remind himself that Lily was just a girl, someone who had her own story to tell. She wasn't his daughter, but still, the necklace was impossible to ignore. Jack looked down at the ground for a moment, gathering his thoughts. "How did you end up in the orphanage?" he asked, his voice softer now. Lily shifted uncomfortably. "I don't really know," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I was found in the woods when I was a baby. That's all they ever told me. I don't have any memory of my parents, just this necklace." Jack's mind spun. Found in the woods, his heart ached as though he could feel the weight of the years of silence pressing in on him. Could it be that Emma somehow had been part of this tragedy? Could the necklace have been passed from one child to another, from his missing daughter to a girl who had no idea of the past it carried? He wanted answers. He needed answers. But as he stood there, facing Lily, something told him that the truth he was seeking might be more painful than he could bear. "I'll find out more about this," Jack said, his voice firm despite the confusion swirling inside him. "I have to know the truth." Lily nodded slowly, her eyes reflecting an understanding that Jack couldn't quite put into words. "I understand," she said quietly, "but please be careful, the truth. It's not always what we want it to be." Jack didn't respond. He just turned and walked away, his mind racing, his heart heavy. He knew he had to go to the orphanage. He had to dig deeper, find the answers that had been buried for so long. But in the pit of his stomach, he felt a sense of dread. The truth he had been searching for might destroy him in ways he couldn't imagine. Jack spent the following days wrestling with his thoughts. Every moment he wasn't busy with the mundane tasks around his cabin. He was consumed with the memory of Lily and the necklace. The more he thought about it, the more questions piled up, each one leading him deeper into a maze of confusion and hope. He couldn't ignore what Lily had said. She was raised at the orphanage, a place he knew had seen its share of abandoned children. But how could that be? How could Emma, his Emma, have ended up there? The necklace was the key, but it also felt like a curse. It was the last piece of Emma he had left, the last tangible connection to his daughter, and now it was in the hands of a girl who, by all accounts, didn't even know its true history. Jack had always tried to keep his mind from straying too far into impossible thoughts, but the more he thought about the girl in the market, the more certain he became that something in his past, something painful, had been connected to Lily's life. One morning, after another restless night spent turning over all the possibilities, Jack made up his mind. He would go to the orphanage. He needed to know everything. He couldn't keep pretending that it was just a coincidence anymore. He had to find out where the necklace came from, and more importantly, what it had to do with Lily, if anything at all. He gathered his things, his thick winter coat, his gloves, and the worn boots he'd been wearing for years. With his mind set, he began the trek down the mountain. The air was cold and the wind whipped through the trees, but Jack barely noticed. His mind was elsewhere, focused on what lay ahead. The road to the orphanage wound through the woods and past the small village, a journey that felt longer than it should have. His heart pounded with each step, and he tried to push aside the sense of dread that clung to him like a shadow. The orphanage was a large, stone building that sat on the outskirts of the village, surrounded by a tall iron gate. It was a place that Jack had heard about over the years, but had never thought to visit. People spoke about it in hushed tones, as though it were a place shrouded in mystery. There were rumors, of course, rumors about children left there under strange circumstances, but none of them had ever seemed important until now. As Jack approached the gate, he hesitated. The sense of unease that had been building in him since his encounter with Lily only intensified. He knew that stepping inside could change everything. It could bring answers, or it could destroy the small semblance of peace he had left. He pushed the gate open, its rusty hinges creaking in protest, and made his way up the path. The orphanage loomed ahead, its gray stone walls standing stark against the pale sky. Jack took a deep breath and walked up to the front door, his footsteps echoing in the stillness. He raised his hand and knocked. A few moments later, the door creaked open, revealing an older woman with a kind face, though her eyes seemed tired, as though she had seen too much. She looked Jack up and down, sizing him up with a glance before speaking. "Can I help you?" she asked in a soft, almost motherly tone. Jack felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He had rehearsed what he was going to say, but now, standing in front of the woman, the words seemed to escape him. Finally, he managed to speak. "I'm looking for information," he said. "About a girl named Lily. She was raised here. I need to know more about her past." The woman's expression shifted slightly, though her face remained calm. "Lily," she repeated, as though the name stirred something inside her. "What is it that you want to know?" "I've met her," Jack said. "She's wearing a necklace, a silver one. It belonged to my daughter, a girl who went missing years ago. I believe it's the same necklace. I need to understand how she has it." The woman's face softened and she stepped back, motioning for Jack to come inside. "Please come in," she said. "This is a conversation that shouldn't be had on the doorstep." Jack stepped into the orphanage, the warmth of the building a sharp contrast to the chill outside. The air smelled of wood and dust, and the faint hum of children's voices could be heard from somewhere deeper within the building. Jack followed the woman down a narrow corridor, each step echoing in the quiet. They arrived at a small office where the woman motioned for him to sit. "I'm Mary," she said, sitting behind a desk cluttered with papers. "I've been here for many years. I know most of the children who have passed through these doors. And Lily, well, she's a special case." Jack sat down, the chair creaking under his weight. His mind was racing, and he tried to calm himself as he waited for Mary to continue. "Lily wasn't like the other children," Mary said, folding her hands on the desk. "She was found abandoned in the woods just like many before her. She was just a baby, wrapped in a blanket with nothing but that necklace. We took her in, of course. She's been here ever since." Jack felt his heart tighten. "Abandoned in the woods," he echoed, his voice barely above a whisper. He could barely comprehend the words. The thought of a baby being left alone in the forest, cold and alone, filled him with a rage he hadn't known he could feel. But then a darker thought crossed his mind. Could this have something to do with Emma? Mary nodded slowly. "Yes, it's not uncommon for children to be left in such a way. We've seen it before. But Lily, she always had that necklace. It's strange. No one knows where it came from, but she's had it as long as anyone can remember." Jack leaned forward, the truth beginning to settle in his mind. "And she's always worn it?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "Always," Mary replied. It was as if she couldn't part with it. Some of the children here try to hold on to anything that reminds them of a past they can't remember. For Lily, that necklace was all she had. Jack's mind was reeling. This wasn't just some random child with a necklace. This was something more, something that tied back to his own past, to the memory of Emma. The necklace wasn't just a piece of jewelry. It was a symbol of something far deeper, something that he wasn't ready to face. "What else can you tell me about her?" Jack asked, his voice rough. "Where did she come from? Who left her?" Mary sighed deeply, as though she had been expecting this question. "We've tried to find out. We've had authorities look into her case. But there's no record of her family, no leads. All we know is that she was left here, with nothing but that necklace and a note that said nothing but her name." Jack's heart skipped a beat. Emma had a note too. It had been small, written in hurried handwriting. He had always believed it was meant for him, some message or clue, but it had never made sense. Could it have been meant for Lily? Could this be the answer he had been waiting for? "I need to see the file," Jack said suddenly, his voice urgent. "I need to see everything you have on her." Mary hesitated, her gaze softening as if she could sense the depth of Jack's pain. "I can show you what we have," she said quietly, "but be prepared. Some things are better left unknown." Jack nodded. He wasn't sure if he was ready to hear whatever was waiting for him, but he knew he couldn't stop now. He had come too far. Mary stood and went to a filing cabinet in the corner of the room. She pulled out a manila folder, its edges frayed from years of handling. She opened it and handed it to Jack. He took the folder, his hands trembling. As he flipped through the papers, his eyes landed on the document that made his heart freeze. There, in the corner of the file, was a name: Emma. His Emma. The words blurred before his eyes, and for a moment Jack wasn't sure if he was dreaming. But the truth was there, staring back at him, cold and clear. The girl in front of him, the one wearing his daughter's necklace, was more connected to his past than he had ever imagined. And the truth was finally beginning to unravel. Jack's mind was spinning. The moment he read Emma's name on the file, everything seemed to blur together. His pulse hammered in his ears and the room suddenly felt too small. He had expected answers, but not like this. Not a revelation that felt like an earthquake shaking the ground beneath him. He had come here searching for Lily's story, for some explanation of the necklace, but instead, he had stumbled upon something far deeper, far more dangerous. His hands trembled as he set the file down on the desk, not trusting himself to hold it any longer. The truth was staring him in the face, and he couldn't quite bring himself to accept it. Lily wasn't just a girl who had somehow come into possession of Emma's necklace. No, it was far more complicated than that. She was connected to his daughter, and not just in some random, meaningless way. The words on the file were clear, but their meaning was like a sharp knife slicing through Jack's chest. Mary watched him carefully, her face unreadable. She hadn't said anything yet, allowing him to absorb the gravity of what he was seeing. The silence in the room felt heavy, oppressive, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Jack finally spoke, his voice hoarse. "How is this possible?" he asked, his words barely more than a whisper. "How could she? How could my daughter be connected to Lily?" Mary's expression softened with understanding. "Jack, sometimes the truth is more complicated than we think," she said quietly. "Lily's story isn't just her own. It's intertwined with yours in ways that neither of you could have ever imagined." Jack's heart hammered in his chest, but he could hardly breathe. He needed to know more, needed to understand what had happened to his daughter, to Lily. To all of them. His mind raced, piecing together the fragments of information he had gathered so far. Emma had vanished so many years ago, but now in front of him was a girl who might hold the key to everything. But how could this be? Mary paused for a long moment, then spoke again, her voice heavy with the weight of the truth she was about to reveal. When Lily was found, she was just a baby, but there was something unusual about her. She wasn't like the other children we've had here. She was different. And I'm afraid I can't explain why. We tried to trace her family to find out where she came from, but there was nothing. Just the necklace and a note with her name. That's all we had. Jack's mind reeled. There was a note. He hadn't known about that. He had always thought the note left with Emma had been meant for him, a clue that might explain her disappearance. But now, the pieces were beginning to fit together in a way he hadn't expected. Could it be possible that Emma and Lily were connected in some way? That the necklace had been passed on to Lily by someone else? And what about the note? "Is there any chance," Jack asked, his voice shaking with urgency, "that the note that was with Lily, could have been meant for me? Could it have been a message about Emma?" Mary's eyes widened in surprise. I don't know, I've never seen the note. It was never part of the official records, but the timing, it's strange, isn't it?" Jack nodded, his thoughts swirling. The pieces of the puzzle were slipping into place, but there were too many missing parts, too many unanswered questions. He had come here hoping for clarity, but instead, he felt more lost than ever. The truth was a sharp, jagged thing, and Jack wasn't sure he could handle it. "I need to speak with Lily," Jack said suddenly, standing up from the chair. His legs felt unsteady, but he couldn't sit any longer. He had to get to the bottom of this. He needed answers, even if they destroyed him in the process. Mary hesitated, clearly unsure whether this was the right thing to do. "Jack, I think you should take a step back," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "Lily doesn't know everything. She doesn't even know the full story about herself. And you." "I need to talk to her," Jack interrupted, his voice growing more urgent. "I can't keep living with these questions. I need to know what happened." Mary's expression softened with sympathy, but she didn't argue further. Instead, she stood up and led Jack down the narrow corridor, past the rows of doors that led to the children's rooms. They reached the end of the hall, where Lily's door was slightly ajar. Mary knocked softly before pushing the door open. Lily was sitting on her bed, a book in her hands. She looked up when they entered, her expression calm, almost serene. There was a quiet strength in her that Jack couldn't deny, but there was also something fragile about her, as if the weight of the world was resting on her shoulders. She didn't speak at first, just looked from Jack to Mary, as though trying to gauge what was going on. "Lily," Jack said, his voice rough with emotion, "I need to talk to you. There's something I need to ask you, something important." Lily looked at him, her gaze steady but guarded. "What is it?" she asked, her voice soft but firm. Jack took a deep breath, his hands trembling. "I don't know how to say this, but I think you might be connected to my daughter. I think you might be her sister." Lily's eyes widened in surprise, but she didn't speak. Jack continued, his words rushing out in a flood. "I came here because I thought you were just a girl with a necklace, but now I think it's more than that. I think you and Emma, my daughter, might be the same. That necklace you wear, it's the same one Emma had, the one I gave her. It's all connected, but I don't understand how." Lily remained silent, her face unreadable. Jack could see the uncertainty in her eyes, and for the first time he saw a flicker of something else, fear. "I don't know what you're talking about," Lily said slowly, her voice trembling. "I don't have a sister. I've always been alone. My past. It's a mystery. I don't know who I really am. I don't even know where I came from." Jack felt a pang of sympathy for her, but the questions gnawed at him. The uncertainty in her voice made him wonder whether she was hiding something, whether she was keeping pieces of the story to herself. "You don't remember anything?" Jack asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "Anything at all about your past?" Lily shook her head. "No, nothing, just the necklace. That's all I've ever had. It's the only thing I can remember." Jack's heart broke at the pain in her voice. She didn't know, she didn't remember. How could she? If she was truly Emma's sister, how had she ended up here, wearing the necklace with no memory of the life that had been stolen from her? "I'm sorry," Jack said softly, his voice full of regret. "I didn't mean to drag you into this. I don't know what's going on, but I have to know the truth. I have to find out what happened." Lily looked at him for a long moment, her eyes searching his face. "I don't know if I can help you," she said quietly. "But if you're looking for answers, I'll do my best to give them to you." Jack nodded, feeling a mix of relief and sadness. He didn't have all the answers yet, but at least he was closer than he had been before. The road ahead would be difficult, but he wasn't alone anymore. And maybe, just maybe, Lily was the key to the truth he had been seeking for so long. The days that followed felt like a blur. Jack could hardly focus on anything except the truth that was slowly unraveling before him. He spent long hours at the orphanage, speaking with Mary, trying to learn more about Lily's past, trying to piece together fragments of his daughter's life that had been lost for so long. But every answer only led to more questions, and with each new revelation, the weight on Jack's shoulders grew heavier. Lily, too, seemed to be struggling with the newfound truth. She spent long hours in silence, her mind racing just as Jack's had. It was as though the very foundation of her life was shifting beneath her feet. She had always believed she was an orphan, abandoned in the woods as a baby, with no family, no past to speak of. But now, in the face of Jack's belief that she might be Emma's sister, everything she knew seemed to be a lie. Could she really be connected to a man like Jack, a man who had lost so much? Jack couldn't shake the feeling that they were standing on the edge of something bigger than either of them could comprehend. The necklace, the note, the strange coincidences, they all pointed to a connection that neither of them had expected, a connection that could change everything. But despite their search for answers, there was still something missing, something that neither of them could put into words. One evening, as the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the orphanage's grounds, Jack found himself standing outside, lost in thought. He had spent most of the day combing through old records with Mary, but nothing concrete had surfaced. The answers he was looking for were still just out of reach. It was then that Lily appeared beside him. She had been quiet all day, lost in her own thoughts, but now she seemed to have made a decision. Jack didn't look at her right away, but he could feel her presence beside him, the weight of her gaze. "Jack," Lily said softly, her voice hesitant as if she were unsure whether she should speak. "I've been thinking about everything, about what you said, about Emma. I don't know if I can believe it, but I don't know if I can ignore it either." Jack turned to face her, his heart heavy with the same uncertainty. "I know this is a lot to take in," he said, his voice gentle. "It's hard for me too, but the necklace, it's a link. I've been holding on to it for so many years, waiting for some kind of sign. And when I saw you wearing it, I couldn't ignore it. I don't know how to explain it, but I believe we're connected." Lily looked at the ground, her brow furrowed as she wrestled with the words that seemed stuck in her throat. "I don't know who I am, Jack. I don't know if I'm Emma's sister or if I'm just someone who happened to find a necklace that doesn't belong to me. My whole life. It's been a mystery, and now I don't even know who I'm supposed to be." Jack felt a deep sympathy for her. He could see the conflict in her eyes, the pain of a past she couldn't remember and a future that felt uncertain. He reached out, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. "You don't have to have all the answers right now," Jack said softly. "I didn't have the answers either. For years I lived in silence, waiting for something, anything, to tell me where Emma had gone. I couldn't let go of the idea that one day I would find her. I think that's why I've held onto that necklace for so long. I thought it was the only thing left of her." Lily nodded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I never had anything like that. No memories, no family to tell me about the past. All I had was the necklace. It felt like something that was supposed to be mine, something that belonged to me, even though I didn't understand why." Jack could feel the weight of her words settling in the air between them. For so long, they had both been living with the ghosts of the past. Jack had carried his grief for years, searching for answers that never came. And now, Lily had been carrying her own burden, trying to make sense of a life she didn't remember. "I don't know what happened to Emma," Jack said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. "But I know I can't go on pretending that the answers don't matter. And I know you deserve to know the truth about your past. Whether or not you're connected to Emma, you deserve to have those answers." Lily looked up at him, her expression softening. "What if I'm not her sister?" she asked, her voice trembling. "What if I'm just someone else? Someone who doesn't fit into your story?" Jack felt a pang of regret, but he knew the truth. "Even if you're not her sister, Lily, you're still important, you matter. And I don't want to lose the chance to know you, to understand who you are. I think we're connected, not just because of the necklace, but because of the lives we've led. And whatever happens, I want to be a part of your story." Lily smiled faintly, though her eyes were still filled with uncertainty. "I don't know what the future holds," she said quietly. "But I think I want to find out. I want to know who I really am, even if it's not the person I thought I was." Jack nodded, a sense of relief washing over him. For the first time in a long while, he felt like there was hope on the horizon, like the past didn't have to define them anymore. There were still so many questions to answer, so many unknowns to face, but in that moment he knew they would face them together. The days that followed were filled with quiet conversations and late-night discussions. Jack and Lily worked together, digging deeper into the records at the orphanage, speaking with those who had been there when Lily was found. The answers came slowly, like pieces of a broken puzzle finally fitting into place. What they uncovered wasn't the full truth, but it was enough to give them both some peace. The authorities had done what they could, but there were no clear answers about Lily's origins. The necklace, however, remained a powerful symbol, one that tied them together in ways neither of them had expected. Whether or not Lily was Emma's sister, they both realized that their connection was real, even if they couldn't fully explain it. One afternoon, as Jack stood outside the orphanage, watching the wind rustle the leaves in the trees, He felt a quiet sense of closure. He hadn't found the exact answers he'd been searching for, but he had found something else, something perhaps even more important. He had found a new chapter in his life, one where the past no longer defined him. And Lily, though still searching for her own identity, was no longer alone. "I'm not sure where this road leads," Jack said to Lily one evening as they stood together on the edge of the orphanage grounds, looking out at the darkening sky. "But I know I don't want to walk it alone, and I don't think you do either." Lily smiled, her eyes filled with quiet determination. "I don't," she agreed softly. "I don't think I do." Jack knew then that whatever the future held, they would face it together. The pain of the past had shaped them both, but it would no longer control their lives. The truth, whatever it was, would come in time. For now they had each other, and that was enough.